Hello, welcome back to the vlog number 3. For this one we were supposed to read an article, and what I found was an article from the institution, or the award-winning magazine, Teaching Tolerance, which is a magazine that has like curriculum and professional development resources and links teachers around the world together to influence social justice and strive to get every student equal opportunities. So it's a diversity like focused magazine. What I found was an interview with a man named Richard Rothstein, who wrote the book The Color of Law. The interview was conducted by Val Brown and edited by Manita Bell from Teaching Tolerance, people from Teaching Tolerance. So the interview was talking about Rothstein's book and the unequal opportunities that minority groups have and why they have them in schools and stuff. And the book talked about equal economic opportunities and how minorities groups do not have the equal quality when it comes to economic opportunities, like jobs and advancements in jobs and wealth. And I think this is important to relate back to school because it all starts in education. Like, you can't really get a high placement job without getting the education to support it. So I wanted to start with education. If we cannot give our children equal opportunities because our schools are segregated with different amounts of money going into each school, how do we expect our students of lower income families and minority groups to exceed and excel the way that the higher income? So this is a socioeconomic difference, but like, how would we expect our lower income to succeed to the same level as our higher income when they're not getting the same support system economically and like financially? So Rothstein stated that segregation was worse than it had ever been in schools before because the neighborhoods are segregated, which was giving minorities a disadvantage from the beginning. So he talked a lot about residential segregation being the problem in causing the school segregation, because people think that it's a natural phenomenon that minorities tend to live close to each other. But he had a really good point. Instead of thinking that it's a natural phenomenon, they should look at the government's role in residential segregation from the 1800s and break the segregation roles. Rothstein continued saying that it was a failure to fully implement the 13th Amendment that have led us to the problem we have now. So there was a second part to the 13th Amendment that required Congress to enact laws that would protect African American civil rights. But the Supreme Court turned down all the laws that were enacted. So Congress tried to put through all these laws, but the Supreme Court kept voting no on all of them. So like, there were no rules to help protect African American civil rights, like living in certain places, and this caused segregation. And then these laws are still not in effect today. So like, we still have laws against African Americans like doing certain things because we've never gone back to fix them. So he talked about going back and fixing the laws that had already been in place and changing some of the laws so that we could have residential like integration instead of residential segregation, and then fixing our residential segregation would fix our school segregation, because schools wouldn't be like, they have a school based off of like where you live and what's around it. So a school is, you get your students based off of where they live. So a school is placed in an area where mostly blacks live, then that school is going to be a minority school because it's mostly black kids, because that's where they all live. So it's the same way with whites and majority groups. So that's just an option of fixing residential segregation to fix school segregation, so we can fix diversity in schools and help give some of those minority groups equal opportunity. That would give minority groups equal opportunities as majority groups, because they'd have the same background, like schooling background, as everyone else. So going on, I think this also ties into life changes that minorities groups are given. So minorities are less likely to get a higher education because they do not have the same advantages that majority groups do have. The book talked about segregated schools and differential treatment of children based on racial and ethnic identity. And I think this is really important because we can relate segregated schools to institutional racism by the policies that they have in place and the segregation that occurs to perpetrate racial discrimination. So Rothstein continued just saying that education is not really properly teaching our kids about segregation and what is really happening. He talked about how one of the books, the American history books, has a paragraph about segregation, and that's it. And segregation is so much more than just a paragraph, and so kids aren't really being properly taught what segregation really is, and that is leading to more segregation because we don't really know what's going on and we don't really know what's happening and we're not teaching it. So this is also can have an impact on what we think morally and ethically is correct and what is not, by making kids think that it's normal to have segregation and that segregation is a natural phenomenon, again bringing up natural phenomenon, and then it's okay because that's the way that minority groups like it, like making them think that that's the way it should be. Schools to finalize, basically, schools also tend to have a lot of stealth racism or racism that is more hidden or subtle. For example, some dress codes single out minority groups, like this is the last thing he talked about, like, so like hats aren't allowed to be worn. Well, what about the students that wear hijabs or the hijab things like around their face, like, so can they not go to school? Is that a thing? So just some thoughts to think about. Thanks for tuning into the vlog number 3. Bye.